We're going to hand it right over to Tom, who hasn't identified himself. He's gonna do this incognito, but I want to hear all about this the trip that you took down there to Grenada. Grenada, is it Okay, tell us. Is it Grenada, Grenada?
It's Grenada. Grenada
Okay.
is in Spain.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Yeah, and that's a different spelling too, with an A.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I had to correct W1CC. He sent me something and he sent a picture of you guys. You were down on the site a couple of years ago on one of your cruises,
Yes.
and he spelled it Grenada with an A. So, okay, I corrected him. Okay. So anyways, Tom, go ahead, take it away. And there's maybe a few people here that don't know you. I think everybody probably does, but why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown on you and what brought you to get down with the YCCC down to Grenada. So K1TH, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm Tom Hurley. My call is K1TH. I've been licensed since 1965. Been reasonably active ever since then. Lived in New York. My original call was a 2, and then I lived in 8land, and then came out here to Massachusetts in 1983. Set up a station. And back around the mid-90s, one Saturday afternoon, I heard the sweepstakes on and had just gotten a TS 830 and decided that I would jump in, and had an absolute blast. And that I believe was 1996. A few years later, I got a chance to know Don, K2KQ, down in New York, a YCCC member, and he introduced me to the YCCC and others. And then I discovered that in the fall of 2000, there was going to be a group headed down to St. George's and operate J3A and CQ Worldwide Phone. And I asked my dear bride, WB2VYO Linda, if I could go, and she said sure. So off I went. And I had an expedition. It was a wonderful opportunity. And what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about it tonight. Not so much from a technical standpoint, but from the fact that one of the things I enjoy about contesting and DXing is talking to really interesting people in very interesting places. And over the last 20 years or so, I've been to many, many parts of the world and gotten a chance to know some wonderful hams and discovered what it was like on the other end of the circuit. Just a little geography lesson. Grenada is in the southeastern Caribbean. It's an independent country. It's part of the, it's independent, but it's part of the British Empire. And it's not very large. It's about the size of Martha's Vineyard, as a matter of fact, if you were to walk all the way around the island. Don, K2KQ, when I first asked him about it, said, yeah, it's about the size of the vineyard, but if you squashed it flat, it would be about the size of Texas. It's very, very mountainous. There is absolutely nothing in Grenada that's flat. It's very, very hilly and very, very gorgeous, mostly covered with tropical forests. I took off on October 22nd, 2000. And if you look out the window, you can see, some of you guys who are familiar with the geography around here will see that I was on my way. Does anybody recognize what's in the picture you're looking at in the picture there? That from about 12,000 feet is...
Looks like the canal.
Yeah, you're looking at the western end of the Cape Cod Canal. That's the Bourne Bridge there, right down in the bottom of the picture, just ahead of the jet engine. So we got down to visit with our group and all collect ourselves in a place called the Tropicana Inn. This, at that time, was about the only place that you could get a room in a hotel in Grenada. Since then, the tourist industry has increased dramatically, and there are quite a number of places. The island right now kind of has a low-key ecotourism theme. No big hotels, no skyscrapers, nothing like that. But there's a lot of small bed and breakfasts, and this place here is still in existence and was our home away from home for about a little over a week. So we got there with the group, and of course, what's the first thing you do before you start putting the station together? Of course, we headed for the beach. And that's Grand Anse Beach. It's one of the most beautiful beaches in the Caribbean. It's not crowded. And we spent a wonderful day there before we got ready to put the station together at J3A. In the center of the picture there, we're going to see next, there's Ann Ortiz, K2DO, she was one of the publicity people. She's a media relations person for a number of organizations, I think including the League, for quite a number of times. So, of course, Diane had to get her hair done before the contest started, of course. I didn't get an after picture. She had all the beads put in her hair there. It was very nice. And if you want girls to like you, I discovered that you have to have wheels. So that was the wheels that I rented while I was on the island. It was interesting. You actually can fit 6 people in that if someone's willing to ride in the back. The only problem is that there's one spot going up the hill to Fort Frederick, which is where the station is based, that you have to do it in reverse because it just didn't have enough power to go uphill with 6 people in it. If you've never driven in the Caribbean or other parts of the British world, they have signs that try to keep Americans honest and keep from getting themselves killed. Yes, you had to drive on the wrong side of the road. And that wasn't too difficult because most roads were really only one lane and you have to work very, very hard to pass a car going in the other direction. Roads are very, very narrow, very twisty, very mountainous. This here is a picture of the operating station. This is J3A. It's at the Emergency Operating Center at a place called Fort Frederick, which overlooks St. George's, which is the capital of Grenada. The peaks that you see in the background go up around 4,000 feet. We're at 790 feet, I believe Fort Frederick is. And there you can see a typical contest setup. There's beams for all of the HF bands, and there's including 40. And we also had dipoles in a couple of different directions on 80, and also a dipole on 160. And the place that I took this picture is the location of where the dipoles were located. There were a long, long run of coax to get up the hill. Very, very tough on the low frequencies because there's a tremendous amount of static in the Caribbean. Very, very hard to hear on 80 and 160, but we did okay. I will point out this was pretty much the top of the sunspot cycle, cycle 23. All the bands were open all day, every day. You could work the world. This is a view from the front door of that building that I just showed you, and that harbor down there is the harbor at St. George's. We had to come up that hill to operate. In fact, the Tropicana Inn, you can't see, it's over the edge of the hill here, but it's down the other side. That building was fairly new that you saw. One of the reasons why it looked so good and so modern was that we blew it up in 1983. As some of you may remember, there was a war in Grenada. The island had been ruled off and on by the British and French for many years. It became an independent entity in 1976, but the Democratic leader was ousted at that time and was taken over by a Marxist sympathizer, a guy named Maurice Bishop, who in turn was killed in 1983 by another group that was even more Marxist than he was. So Ronald Reagan decided, and some of the other people on the other islands down in the Southern Caribbean decided they were not going to allow that to happen. So Operation Urgent Fury was launched. We went in and had a war that lasted about a week. The communists were thrown out. The government was reestablished, and it continues to this day. And that particular building that we operated in, which is actually called the National Disaster Relief Center, was damaged in the fighting, and Task Force Alpha, the engineering battalion, rebuilt it for the Grenadian. Okay, so now it's time to set up the contest. Enough of the beach stuff and all the fun and frolicking. We decided that the easiest way to get towers up was to commandeer one of the local telephone company guys, also was a ham or had contacts in the amateur community, and brought a bucket truck up. and you can see him trying to back into this little alcove between the two buildings with the bucket truck, but he ran into problems. That's Jeff, a November 3 Mike Victor from Pennsylvania, who was part of the team. And we tried to put rocks under the back wheels. That's not a four-wheel drive vehicle. So what do? I got to point out, you have to know that the temperature in Grenada in late October, almost all times of the year, is extremely warm. It was in the 90s, temperature was in the 90s, and the humidity was near 100%. It was very, very difficult working, putting up antennas and all of that. But we worked hard. So what happened here, interestingly enough, is a tower section. One of the elements on the 40-meter beam was bad. The truck was trying to back into this area that you see right at the bottom of the picture. He was trying to back into that little cubby hole area. Couldn't get in there because of the rockiness. So, but we had to work on the beam, which was on top of this tower that's over in the right-hand side of the picture. We did not want to take it down. The element got twisted. So they put up a tower section, several tower sections, strapped them to the side of the building, roped it off on the top, and Jeff climbed to the top and had to get the beam straightened out. So he's on a tower that's being held by a bunch of us off in different directions while he works on the elements. If anybody has any questions anywhere along the way, just shout it out. And I'm happy to report nobody was hurt or killed in this endeavor. All day Thursday and into Friday, we were working on antennas. I'm trying to figure out, that looks like the 10-meter beam. 10 was open 24 hours a day, I might add. Here we are working on another one of the beams. The fellow on the left side of the screen was a local fellow who we hired to work with us for the several days that it took to put up the antennas. And there's George Tranos, N2GA, who you recognize from CQ magazine, and Frank, N2FF, from, he's I think one of the board members of the ARRL. He was, I think, New York, Long Island manager at the time for ARRL. So we were working there. There goes up another beam, two guys on that tower. The facility itself is operated by what I call the EOC, and there's somebody standing by a radio, HF radio, all the time there to communicate with the other islands. At least that's the way it was at the time. And what we did is we took down their dipole and their TA-33, removed them for the duration of the contest, and then put these bigger antennas up, fixed up the TA-33, which is gets abused in the tropical air, fixed it all up, and at the end of the contest, put everything back the way it was, only this time it all worked with good SWR.
Tom, I got a question. It's
yes,
K1WCC.
Yeah, hey, Henry.
The 40-meter beam, whose beam was that? Do you know?
I do not know. There were a lot of antennas stored down there year to year, and J3A was the call sign that we used, but J3A is a call sign that gets used a lot down there by different people, and there's an inventory of antennas. We did not bring it with us. I know it was on the island to start with.
Yeah, our club has an identical beam, 40-meter beam, and I often wondered who made it.
Yeah,
I think it looked like the Cushcraft, maybe.
It may very well have been. All the stuff was stored in a room in that building, and it all required a little bit of work. The dampness really gets to it after a while. I'll show you another thing in just a moment that survived the dampness. An L4B linear that sat in the closet for a year in really hot, damp conditions, and flipped it on, and it ran 48 hours on 40 meters. There's where the dipoles were, up on the top of the hill, and there's the top, very, very top of Fort Frederick. One of the things that's very interesting about operating in Grenada, because it's so hilly, mountainous, is that it makes its own weather. When you're working on antennas, you have to watch over the top of the mountain. Here comes another rain shower. You'd climb up the tower, the rain shower would come along, boom, we would get drenched for 20 or 25 minutes, and then the rain shower would go away. and it was back to sunny and bright again. This was not a frontal weather system, but just the fact that the wind blows across the water, goes up the side of the hill, cools down, rains, and then passes on. Mountainous islands do that, the flat islands, and you'll see a picture of a flat island in a little bit. It stays almost like a desert, and that is not a desert there. Okay, so we got the antennas up. Time's wasting. It's now late Thursday. Friday's coming, ready to the contest, and here's George and Frank working on getting an Ameritron amplifier going. I don't know particularly what the problem was there, but they got it going. We ran 6 stations, 24 hours a day. You can see the clock on the wall there says a little before noon. This is just a little before noon on Friday. We had the station set up. You'll notice some fairly old technology there. Remember, this will be 20 years ago in 4 weeks that this was done. It's also the first time I'd ever used a digital camera. And I wasn't there to record it to do a presentation like this. I was just snapping pictures. And fortunately, I snapped enough of them that we could put something together here. There's Charlie K1XX in the background and Frank W2FC. You'll see him up closer in the next picture. Now, what you've got to see is that there are 5 stations here. I've got my back into another room that the 40-meter station is. We've got, it's 95 degrees, it's 100% humidity, there is no air conditioning, and we have 6 kilowatt stations all running in the same room. So,
were there any showers available?
No. Well, there was back at the hotel, but not up there. So, and it was about a 25-minute run up the hill in the car. And we had 2 cars, so we took turns using the cars. There's another view just before the contest started of the beautiful harbor at St. George. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, Friday afternoon, we had to get the stations ready to go early because we have visitors. Those are the Girl Guides, like the Girl Scouts on the island. That's Don, K2KQ. In the center, he invited the girls up, and they got a chance to see what amateur radio was all about. It was a wonderful hour that we spent with them. And if you remember, because this is year 2000, this is before cell phones. So these young ladies today obviously would have a cell phone. Everybody in the Caribbean has one. But Don introduced them to Meter FM, and boy, oh boy, you gave them radios to play with. They had Girl Guides inside and outside talking to each other, kind of like Pi talked to Princess Marconi that time out on the Cape. Only a few feet away, but it could have been 500 miles. It was just as much fun. So they got a chance to talk on the radio and have an awful good time. And we had a wonderful time hosting them just before the contest started. They really had a lot of fun. So I thought you can't just barely see it here, but as the contest started, there was a beautiful rainbow that appeared in the sky. You can see it just beyond the beam there, next to the fence. There's K1EP, he's one of our operators. Ed Parrish, you see him he's at every one of the House Traders deer fields that we have. I see him up there all the time. There's George, N2GA. That's the husband of Diane, K2DO. On K2KQ, he was in charge of D and 160 and kept those bands going the whole time. And there's, I've lost track of this fellow. This is Mike, November 3, Mike Victor from Pennsylvania. He came up and he did all the tower climbing along with George for a day and a half, got all the beams up, went, took a shower, came back, sat in that chair beginning Friday night and operated for 48 hours straight. He never ended. He kept that station on the air. That was not run on shifts. That was run by him the whole time.
Was he catheterized?
Well, you can't see the little bottle just off to the side. He kept going. He could call CQ and not miss a beat. By the way, that linear off just beyond him is the L4B that we pulled out of the closet that was damp and soggy and almost green when we pulled it out. And I just shuddered when they threw the switch and the thing came on and operated 48 hours without a problem.
Oh, is that CT on the screen there, Tom?
That is CT, yep. All 6 computers were ganged. So that, for example, the rate counter that we were looking at was not just the rate that we were operating at, but the rate of the entire team at that time. And I remember about an hour into the contest, we saw the rate counter go over 1,000 contacts per hour. So we were putting out a big signal from a place that obviously had a great shot into North America and Europe.
And I see you're wearing your Marconi shirt too, your W1AA shirt.
I am, as a matter of fact. Today, I'm wearing my Grenada shirt. Okay, I wore it with the Grenadian flag on it. So that was, I think that was, if you can see right up on the shutter there, there's a J3A sign, 5908. You'd think after 15,000 contacts, you wouldn't forget the call sign in the zone, but you do. So there's always something to look at. We had a policy that we said the call sign after every contact. There was no running without saying the call sign. The other little option that you can see, and I had it in some of the other pictures, but I didn't point it out, is that right underneath the monitor, there's a muffin fan blowing on me, and we had muffin fans blowing on everybody because of the heat and the humidity. This actually was taken as a still shot after, I think after the contest, because all the seats would have been occupied while we were running. Took very, very few pictures while the contest was on because everybody was so busy. And it never occurred to me to take pictures during the contest, but there you go. And that would have been, I think, 20 meters I may have been on. Anyway, this is the award that we got at the end of the contest. The editors gave it to us. 24,983,000 points. I think we made about 15,000 contacts over the course of the weekend. It was K1EP, me, K1XX Charlie, K2DO, Diane, Don, K2KQ, Frank, N2FF, George, N2GA, Jeff, N3 Mike Victor, and Frank, W6 Frank Charlie were the operators. And some of the spouses came as well. Well, after the contest was over, we got a chance to go. We took the antennas down. We repacked them. We put the antennas back up that the EOC had, and then we spent several days exploring the island. It's a wonderful place. If you ever get a chance to go to Grenada, I'd highly recommend it. The people are friendly. You can see the young ladies walking from school over on the left side. Typical British situation there. They're all in fresh uniforms, wearing ties. It's a bustling metropolis. That's an overstatement. It's a bustling little town with a lot of ships coming and going, and just a whole lot of activity down by the port, which is called le carénage, which is a French word, and we'll tell you in just a little bit about why they call it le carénage. We took off, we rented a van and headed around the island, had a wonderful time visiting these little villages all around the island. We got a chance to see the island's main crop, which is nutmeg. It's known as the Spice Isle. They grow a very significant portion of the world's supply of nutmeg. They're put out on large trays like this to be dried out in the sun during the day and then slid back underneath the building at night so they don't get covered with dew. And that's what nutmeg looks like as it's being in storage. We had a nice tour there. Here's a lady that's sorting the nutmeg and getting ready to it's cracked open. And it's really got two components to it. There's the nut itself, which is used as a spice and a flavoring, but there's the outer skin or underneath the shell, but outside the nut, and that's called mace. And what you're looking at is the mace of the nutmeg right there. That's what it looks like. And that's dried. And that's also used for seasonings and flavorings in the Caribbean and around the world. We continued on around the island. This is what a drive-through restaurant looks like. This is as fancy as it gets, and it was a wonderful, wonderful place to stop, of course, right there along the water. We got out to the west end of the island, make that the east end of the island, and this is a, does anybody know what that airplane is? Any aviation people here? That's an Antonov AN-2. That's the world's largest single-engine biplane ever built. Still used for skydiving and jumping in some parts of the world. Before the communists took over, well, actually, when the communists took over, this is a Russian airplane, and you can see behind the door, you can still see CCCP on the fuselage, possibly. This was taken at the old Pearls Airport. The Cubans came in and built the larger airport on the south side of the islands at Point Salines, and this airport was abandoned. Most of the workers for the new airport came into the old Pearls Airport, and then after that airfield was abandoned, left the airplane there. There's some bullet holes in the airplane, if you notice. And I'm standing there going, we could drag this thing back to Plymouth and, do a little fluff and buff and get this thing back in the air again. No, that airplane is still there, by the way. This is an Antonov AN-26, I think. Those are turboprop engines. And that's a passenger plane. I believe it's still in production. That was also at Pearls. And in fact, if you heard about an air crash in, was it Belarus the other day? It was one of these airplanes. They're still being used. Most of the country is happy that they were liberated by the American and Caribbean and Canadian forces in 1983. But you can see that back up in the hill country, there's still a great fondness for the Cubans that says, Viva Fidel, Grenada, Cuba, friends forever. We decided not to engage anybody in political dialogue. We just kind of took a picture and kept on trucking. Payphones, there's another thing you don't see anymore because everybody has a cell phone. So the next day, after a very nice dinner that night, we jumped on the ferry boat and we went to the other island that makes up Grenada. There are actually a couple of islands. And the island of Carriacou, which is about 30 miles north of the main isle of Grenada. And we rented, or actually had a guy, we took a guy who had a van, and we commandeered him for the day. And we went around the island and got a chance to see Carriacou. If you notice, the hills there are much lower than the ones on the main island of Grenada. So the weather in Carriacou is vastly different than in Grenada, even though it's only 30 miles away. The hills are low enough that the island does not generate its own weather. So unless there's a storm, they don't get rain. It's a very, very dry place. And if you look off across the bay, just about in the center of the picture, you see a strip there along the other side of the bay that's open. And that actually is part of the road that goes around the island, but that's the airstrip. So the road comes along, takes a left-hand turn, goes down the airstrip, and then turns off the airstrip with another left-hand turn. So there's a sign there that says, look both ways before you drive down the road because you share it with airplanes. You don't see that in the United States. FAA would have a fit. Driving around, this is again Carriacou, farms, light farming, and just a very laid-back kind of place. The island in the distance is called Petite Martinique, which is also part of Grenada. So Carriacou, Petite Martinique, and Grenada make up the three islands of the country. About 700 people live over there. We did not get a chance to go over to Petite Martinique for the day. This is an interesting thing. You see this around the Caribbean a lot in Grenada. This fellow's repairing the bottom of his boat. In North America, the word careen means to like drive quickly around a corner, doesn't it? Careening around a corner. But in the rest of the world, careening is what this guy is doing. He is repairing the bottom of the boat by tilting the boat off to the one side by putting a weight at the top of the mast. And which is how the harbor in St. George's got named. It was French, La Carénage, which means the careened place. And that's where and how they repair boats. I thought it was pretty ingenious. The Grenadian house, typical of what you see in Grenada. It's kind of a nice one. Open air, a lot of open porches, windows that open. Oh, and there's Frank, B6FC, who decided to, become a Rastafarian while he was down there. On the opposite end of the island, the driver left us in this little tiny place and said he would be back to pick us up in a couple hours after we enjoyed some Caribs on the beach. And we thought, boy, if this guy doesn't come back and get us, we're stuck here on this little island. And my flight was back the next day. But he came back when he said he would, and Frank gave the hat back, and we were on our way. And there's the picture of the group that operated, that and some of our helpers there. We had a wonderful time. The country could not have been more accommodating. We had some wonderful meals together, just a whole lot of laughs. And if any of you ever get a chance to be part of a team that does something like that, I would highly recommend it. Obviously, the COVID thing has to pass, but countries welcome us, and in most parts of this part of the world anyway, Americans are very welcome. And it's just a whole lot of fun. And of course, the island is English speaking, Creole in some parts of the island, but everybody speaks English. So thanks for watching. If I can answer any questions or supply any inspiration, I will be happy to do that.
Hey, Tom,
Did I get this? I did get it done in a half hour. Yeah.
Just a comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Stacy and I have visited Grenada a couple of times. The first time was probably in the mid-90s,
yeah,
on a cruise. And it is, if you haven't been there, if you haven't seen it, that Fort Frederick is just, it is dramatically above the city itself. It feels like you're going straight up. And at that time, they were rebuilding the roads, which were poured cement. And, the madcap taxi driver who sold us spices out of the trunk was basically putting half the wheel on the pavement, or what was left of it, and half of it in thin air on the way up. But we also went to the tour included the highest point on the island and the aloe vera factory as well.
Yes.
So I hope you got a chance to see those too.
We did. I've got hundreds of pictures, and the hardest thing about putting this together was editing which ones I would put in here today.
Yeah, and our second trip was probably within the past 10 years, and it had definitely, as you said, cell phones, cell towers, and just a lot more modernized than it was in probably, we're probably 10 years after the Urgent Fury. So anyways,
yes,
good time.
Tom, you were showing the thing with the nutmeg, and I know that this is not a trivia question or anything, but Connecticut is the nutmeg state. Was there some kind of a large tie-in between the state of Connecticut and their nutmeg operation?
I don't know. I don't know of any connection between Grenada and Connecticut, but that would be a good thing to research.
All right. Well, okay, that's our assignment for next time, I guess.
Okay.
Hey, tell me now, when you guys were calling CQ for 48 hours straight, was this back in the time when you didn't have access to voice keyers and things like that, or did you guys do that?
No voice keyers at all. We did have an internet connection, sporadic, about 5 or 6 minutes, about once every 2 or 3 hours, so we could see who was being spotted around the world. but we did not have at that time an internet connection. It was actually a dial-up to the U.S. and it lasted a few minutes at a time. But nope, we were down there by ourselves.
Well, I checked my log here, and I got I don't know how many, like 60-something contacts with J3A over the years, but I had 4 contacts during the 2000 CQ Worldwide phone contest, and I think you told me that your primary band was 10 meters, and I see a contact there, so I must have worked you when you were down there.
Yeah, one of I was not like K1EP and K1XX, the guys who could sit there for hours and hours and hours. I'm a mere mortal when it comes to contesting, but I did come up and start at midnight one night. It was pretty quiet on the band, and then about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a huge pileup on us from VK land and ZL land. You just never knew which way the signals were going to come in from. I just hope that this cycle is as good as the last one. Our antennas favored in that direction, so it was great. Yeah, 10 meters was fabulous.
People that are fairly new to the hobby, like within the last 4 or 5 years, they caught a little bit of the tail end of things when they first began, but maybe they weren't interested in chasing DX and stuff like that. But you were there when you were down there. This was like prime time, and that's what really can happen if you have a decent propagation and antennas.
Yeah, and of course you're needed down there. It's not a terribly rare country because people go there on vacation quite a bit now. But during contests, we were the only station on. The one slide that I didn't put in there, I should have. Frank and I ran back to the hotel, and he had a TS-50 that he had just bought, and we stuck a wire out the window and worked J3A. He was W6FC stroke J3A because Grenada was the one country that J3 had not yet worked. so we worked them on all 5 bands or 6 bands at the time.
Hey, Tom, what was the quality of the power, the street power down there? Was it reliable? Was it clean?
Yes. Yeah, the power was fine. It was 110. We had the EOC had a backup generator. We did not have to use it. Power there was not a problem. One of and I cannot remember Gil's call sign, J3, and he lived right, he had the connection with the power company that got us that bucket truck. He lived just down the hill from the fort, and he made sure that he has good power, and everybody else up there did. But electricity is not a problem on Grenada. No.
Any hardware problems? Any problems with the rigs or anything like that while the contest was going on, especially with all that humidity and everything?
No, it was remarkable. We had fairly new rigs at the time, and I can't recall any. The computers would occasionally burp, and one would drop off the chain. But no, we had no downtime because of equipment while we were there.
Yeah, the computers were kind of a big deal size-wise. It's not a little laptop under the arm back in 2000, was it? Those are pretty big by comparison.
And I think probably back then we were probably, I don't even know if we were running Windows or not. I think CT ran under DOS, if I remember back in those days.
I did.
Yeah, it was a great program. I still have it on a disk here someplace.
Your Windows 3.1 machine, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Tom, how did you transport everything down there? All by, packaging it up, and did you have to take the monitors and the computers and the transceivers?
They were collected around the island. There are a number of hams around the island. Some were stored at the EOC. I forget who the procurement officer was. There was enough computers on the island to be able to pull it together, and because that's a government installation, there were some government computers that we were using there too. So we did bring radios and some power supplies. The amplifiers were shipped in ahead of time. I know there was a lot of coax sent down ahead of time, which is what we used to go up the hill, which we left there, by the way. And because the station is used quite often, both for worldwide and ARRLDX and other contests, there's just this collection of stuff, and the building was big enough to store it in. So there was, and I think there still is, a pretty good list of what's there already. Yeah.
So you didn't need to bring your own transceivers, or you didn't have your own, well, you said you did have some of it, I guess.
Yes.
Power supplies and linears or not? Yeah.
The linears were shipped in ahead of time. Jeff, that was his 1000 MP, or I think it was a 1000 or 1000 MP that he was using on 40. Some of the smaller transceivers were just coming in at that time, and they were relatively easy to carry as luggage. The transceivers were brought in, yeah. And I forget what we left them there with. There was a transceiver that was left in the EOC for them to use for emergency communications. I'm sure they're using satellite now, but at the time, there was a whole network of HF stations around the islands there. There are several active hams on the island that occasionally are in HF. But there was quite a bit of 2-meter activity. There were quite a few J3s on VHF. And there was a repeater, not on that hill, but another hill close by.
There's a ham that spends every winter down there, at least 1 month, maybe 2. He's got a W1 call sign, but he's you can always hear him on 17 meters with the HF pack crew on 18157.5. It's I think it's W1AJT maybe, or something like that, stroke J3. And he's transmitting from the beach with 1 foot in the water and a cooler beside him there. And he really paints, he kind of does it up big, but he paints this glorious picture of what he's looking at and the people in the bikinis and all that. So it sounds like a great place.
Yeah. Yeah. You actually don't see too many bikinis. It's the population is very modest. If they're wearing a skimpy bathing suit, they're from Europe.
Is that the island
or if they're not wearing a bathing suit at all, they're from Europe.
Yeah, yeah.
One of those islands is predominantly Seventh-day Adventist. Is that Grenada?
No, it's not Grenada, and I'm not sure which one it is. The island is about 40% Catholic and about 40% Protestant of various denominations, and then about 20%, I looked that up before today's little Zoom meeting here, various native beliefs. They did get hit by a hurricane. I don't know, Chuck, whether you were there before or after the hurricane most recently. You don't normally get hurricanes. There's a lot of sailing, big sailboats that go down there and yachts in the wintertime because, or during hurricane season rather, because it's below the 11th parallel, and the insurance companies require these expensive yachts to go below the 11th parallel so that they have a very low odds of getting hit by a hurricane. But they have been hit a couple of times in the last 20 years. They've rebuilt, but it was devastating when it hits, because the winds go up the side of those hills, and it's devastating. And those roads that Chuck were talking about get washed out.
So Tom, would you consider going to a place like Bouvet? And if so, you expect the same similar conditions that you had when you were down in Grenada?
I've decided that all my de-expeditioning from now on will be someplace that you can have high tea at 4 o'clock in the concierge level. No, my Bouvet days are probably not going to happen, but I would go back to these Caribbean islands and do a contest. A little group wanted to get together. loads of fun. By the way, we put the antenna back up. We put the TA-33 back up there on Monday, relaxed a little bit for the day before we headed for Carriacou on Tuesday. And I aimed the TA-33 back up towards this way and operated for about 2 hours and worked, 300 stations who were not in the contest but were non-contest stations, and got going and just had a ball. I got the log. I sent out QSL cards for weeks and months afterwards, but I would say things like YLs only or QRP only, or and when the pileup got so bad, I would say the station with 2 echo in it come back. I just made that up. There had to have been at least one station with 2 echo in it, and worked through the pileup that way. It was always people calling, and that was barefoot with a TA-33.
Oh, that's awesome. Anybody else have any questions now for Tom? Well, Tom, we really appreciate you doing this, and you know, a lot of us that have been around chasing DX or contesting for years, we've had the benefit of going through complete solar cycles, so we know when it's good, and we know what it's like when it's not good. So it's great to hear this kind of a happy story about getting down there and everything worked. No one was injured. I mean, I have to say, I didn't see any hard hats amongst you. And I wonder whether you would have passed the rigid requirements that K1IR now has all of the tower climbers doing.
I think that hard hats would be a great idea. I got to tell you, give me one more reason for my body temperature to go up 1/10 of a degree, and I would have really been dead.
Okay. Well,
it was hot.
Again, thanks. Yeah, again, and you know, I mean, as difficult as that part of it was, obviously it was an enjoyable thing. Now, the guys from the YCCC, they had kind of, I don't know whether they had a monopoly on that place during the major contest, but they were going pretty regularly in both phone and CW. And I remember, I didn't see her in your crew, but Ann, WA1S, was always a regular going down with them. She was a QSL manager too.
Yeah, Ann was in the CW contest, I think, a month later, and she's the one who designed that card. A quick aside, it was a bit of a work to get a Grenadian license at the time. I don't think licensing down there is as difficult anymore. But the prime minister that was killed by the communist that was killed by the communists, the guy's name was Maurice Bishop. I didn't go into the history. It was Maurice Bishop's right-hand man that coordinated the whole thing for us down there. He was not a ham, but he took care of all the licensing. He took care of all the vehicles, made sure that the Tropicana was ready for us and all of that. So it's a small country, and it was K2KQ's good relationship with all those guys that, you know, greased the skids for us down there, made everything real easy.
Well, once they found a good spot like that and had built a good relationship, I know because I can remember over the years them soliciting, you know, not going overboard with this, but if people had equipment donations or things like that, or funds or whatever, it went to a good place, and everybody knew it was going to be used.
Yep, for sure.
Again, thank you, and we certainly appreciate that. And now we're going to be looking for another presentation. Maybe we can get one on somebody to do one on DX for us.